If you want to have a relatively lightweight setup for wildlife and especially bird photography, there are several interesting options in the Micro Four Thirds system. For example, the Olympus 300mm f4 or the 150 to 400mm f4.5 with the integrated 1.25 extender. However, what I was always missing was something with a larger aperture, maybe with a bit a shorter focal length that just allowed me to get a bit more creative, to show a bit more of the habitat of the animals that I photograph. And I'm very happy that OM-System gave me the 50 to 200mm f2.8 IS Pro lens to test for around 10 days. And I have been using it in the fields, in the forest and up in the mountains. And in this video I want to give you an overview of the lens and also talk about my first experiences with the image quality, especially also if you combine it with tele extenders, about the autofocus and image stabilization. As already mentioned, it's a 50 to 200mm lens f2.8. So that means in full frame equivalent terms, we have a focal length of 100 to 400mm, and the background rendition and also the high ISO performance is comparable to 100 to 400mm f5.6, which is a quite all-around telephoto lens. And I feel like this is a focal range that I like to use a lot for my style of photography. One thing that really sets it apart from many 100 to 400mm full frame lenses is the fact that it's an internal zoom, meaning the tubus is not extending if I zoom, which can be a bit annoying for the handling. But more importantly for me, these cameras that have an inner focus zoom, it's easier to turn the zoom from 50 to 200mm. It's just one quick throw that I can do quite easily, so this gives me more flexibility. It's 23 centimeters long and it weighs just above 1 kilo, to be precise 1 kilo and 75 grams. The white paint already indicates that it's a professional lens from OM-System, and it looks very similar to the 150 to 400mm IS Pro lens. We have, as I mentioned, the zoom ring here, then we have the focus ring in front. What I really enjoy is that we have here 4 function buttons and a focus preset button. So by default, they are set up in a way that here you do the focus preset. For example, if you take pictures of flying birds, this can be useful. Or if you are at the feeder and the birds are always appearing at the same distance, you once set the focus here, and whenever the focus kind of goes to the background, you can easily recall it with a click here. So that's a nice setup and I really enjoyed it. The tripod collar or the tripod foot has an Arca Swiss foot, which is useful if you shoot from a tripod. However, with this lightweight, I never used it on a tripod, and if it were my lens, I would probably even remove the tripod collar completely to have an even lighter lens. In terms of other controls, you have here the focus limiter. And what I enjoy is that it has kind of 3 settings. You have the full range, 3 meters to infinity, and 78 centimeters to 3 meters. And that's something that I don't see a lot with lenses of this zoom range, that they have this kind of near limiter, which is really cool. For example, if I want to take pictures of dragonflies in flight, the distance of roughly 80 centimeters to 3 meters makes sure that the focus cannot easily go on the background. Having said that, if you want to have more option and fine-tune it a bit more, you have in the camera in the OM1 Mark II the option to set a digital focus limiter as well and activate and deactivate it with the push of a button. Just below we have the autofocus manual focus switch. Then we have the image stabilizer on off. The image stabilizer is up to 7 stops sync IS, meaning it works together with the IBIS of the OM1 Mark II. And then you have a switch for the lens function buttons. Here the lens hood has like a small window to open, which is nice if you want to turn a polarizer filter, and the filter thread is 77 millimeters. As I mentioned before, the minimum focus distance is 78 centimeters, which is really cool if you do the occasional close-up or macro photography work. And with this you get a maximum magnification of 0.25, which, considering the small size of Micro Four Thirds, really means that you can take pictures of rather small insect already quite large. If you want an even bigger magnification, you can always use either the 1.4 or 2 times extender. So let's get to my real world experiences with the lens. The image quality is just awesome. I mean, I have no complaints about it. I was shooting wide open most of the time from 50 to 200 millimeters. I think I use pretty much everything just because it's a focal range that I like to use, and I was just very happy with it. No complaints here. But how does it perform if you add the tele converter? So with the 1.4 extender, I saw a minimal loss in image quality, but still performing very well. With the 2x extender, it dropped a bit more, but what I noticed even more is that it was not so consistent anymore. Meaning if I took a series of shots, it could be that some of the shots were perfectly sharp, and with others you really saw that you used the tele extender. Not the first zoom lens where I have this phenomenon that just once you add, especially the 2x converter, it's a bit hit or miss if the image is still sharp or not. That being said, it was never terribly soft, but you saw the differences. So I would definitely recommend to use it with the 1.4 extender. For me, the 2x extender is something you can do in rare occasions, but if you find yourself often in situations where you want to have 800 millimeter full frame equivalent of focal length, then I think having this lens with a 2x extender is not the best idea. There is just better options such as the 150 to 400 that I already mentioned before. The autofocus of this lens is quiet and very fast. I was very happy for the flight shots that I took, for example, of the Nutcracker, and it allows to use the 50 frames per second with continuous autofocus of the camera. This only works with certain lenses, and this lens is one of them. I just killed a fly on accident. Let's move to the image stabilizer. As I mentioned, 7-stop sync IS, and I was recently in the mountains, and on the way back from the Ibex, it was maybe 40 minutes after sunset. The moon was starting to rise behind the mountain. I wanted to take some images, and keep in mind that I was already hiking for half an hour, because this usually means you're not as calm and steady as you could be theoretically. So I tried to take some pictures. I started with 1/20th of a second, and then what I usually do is I lower the shutter speed and lower the ISO just to see if I can get more images that are still sharp but with less noise, better details, better colors. And I was at 1 second of a shutter speed, and I had no problem hand holding 1 second shutter speed, just hand holding like this. I was actually even standing, I was not even sitting, and most of the images, I would say maybe 80%, maybe even a bit more, were still tag sharp. And this was a performance that I just have never experienced with any other lens from any brand, including OM-System. At least this was my experience, so this was very cool. Of course, this only works or is only useful if the subject that you photograph is still. So the rising moon is not so much of a problem. What about the robin that is sitting there? Can I still take a picture of this with 1 second? Probably not. However, if there are some leaves that are covering the robin and I want to get a nicer shot, I might need to take a bit of different angle. So I can use the tilt screen and shoot like this, and I avoid the problem. I have a nicer shot of the robin. However, I will be more shaky, and in this situation, even if I shoot at the 60th or 80th or maybe even 100th of a second, I will be very happy to have this good image stabilizer. If you want more tips about bird photography, please check out my ebook that I linked below. So to bring this video to a conclusion, what do I think about this lens? If somebody would tell me, Fabian, you're only allowed to shoot micro four thirds from now on, and you're only allowed to have one lens, not more, I would, pretty sure, I would pick this lens. It's just a lens that fits the best my style of shooting. I can work more with the background rendition. I can at the same time include more of the environment. You can see this image of a chaffinch, which is not a common bird at all. It's not a rare bird at all. It's the most common bird in Switzerland. And still, I really like the image because it's something that, at least personally, I have not captured like this before. I just included a bit the foreground that gave a nice bokeh, and this lens allows this very well. So if I would need to choose, I would take this lens. If the lens is the right choice for you is a different question entirely. If you just start with bird photography, I would maybe go for the 100 to 400 millimeter lens. It's also a zoom lens. It gives you more focal length, because you will find that for many birds, especially shy birds, 400 millimeter focal length, I mean full frame equivalent, is still a bit short. And if you take a lot of pictures of rather small and shy birds or other wildlife, then I think the 150 to 400 might be a better option. It's more expensive, but it just makes more sense for that. This one for me is really for if you have the chance to get closer to the subject, if you want to play a bit more with the environment. For macro photography, as I mentioned, it's amazing. Of course, it's not a macro lens, but it allows you to keep a bigger shooting distance to your subject. Of course, what is an amazing combination I could only imagine is the 50 to 200 millimeter 2.8 and the 150 to 400 millimeter f4.5. It's expensive, I completely agree, but I think this would be a really cool, if not the best combination for wildlife photography if you shoot with the Micro Four Thirds system. If you have any questions, please let me know below. I will try my best to answer them, and I linked all the equipment that I mentioned here, the lens, the camera, tele extenders and so on, in the video description. If you buy over these links, you would just help me to support the channel, and as I mentioned, please check out the ebook.